as we turn to our final session of the day, we want to call out some more of you, some more of those who are in community with us at our conference, even if you can't see them on screen. So welcome to four good friends of WIDA who we're so pleased could join us today. Sergio Gomez Lara, who's Mexico's Business Coordinating Council in Washington, Luke Harms with Whirlpool Corporation, Jordan Haas with Intel Corporation, and Dr. Sheng Liu at the University of Delaware. Welcome, Sergio, Luke, Jordan, and Dr. Liu, and thank you to everybody who's been sticking around for the afternoon. I'd like to now ask our next panel to please turn on their screens. The conference today has addressed key themes in the U.S. national security strategy. And to close out our conference today, we're going to dive into a topic that builds off our last session and all the issues we've been discussing today to talk about the tech-enabled metamorphosis of global manufacturing. To help us do this, we've brought together four newcomers to the platform, and we're honored they've taken time out of their busy days to help us glimpse a way forward into the world we are becoming. Michael Cicco is President and CEO of FANUC America Corporation. Chris Della Rocca is Chief Information Officer, Corporate Business Technology at Johnson & Johnson. Joe Stockunas is President of Semi America. And Joe Stockunas, and George Young is Vice President of Secure Digital Operations at Rockwell Automation. Thank you for joining us. And our moderator is Andrea Durkin, Vice President for International Policy at the National Association of Manufacturers, another of our conference and USMCA sponsors. I'm always grateful to you, Andrea, for your friendship and partnership.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you to everybody for sticking around for this last hour of this amazing conference. It's been really enriching and dense. I'm really delighted to moderate this panel on Manufacturing 4.0, which I think is bound to be a topic that's going to get much more attention in the coming months in the trade policy arena. And it dovetails really nicely with the last panel. So the last panel focused really heavily on the policy aspects. And I think what we have an opportunity here with these industry leaders to do today in this last panel is to really get a grounding on what Manufacturing 4.0 actually looks like in practice, from use of AI in manufacturing R&D to automation and robotics on the factory floor, to the deployment of digital software and digital tools to enhance the ways that manufacturers interact with their customers. In the case of J&J, are their patients. Thank you to all of you for joining the panel today. I'm going to kick it off with Mike Cicco from FANUC. Mike, for those who don't know, FANUC is a global leader in factory automation, and we're all sort of cognizant of the fact that industrial robots are pretty cool today. They're faster and more flexible than ever, and ever present, and really critical to competitiveness. But to set the scene, help us understand what that really looks like in terms of deployment of automation and robots in different factory settings and for different industrial sectors.
Yeah, good afternoon, Andrea, and everyone else on the line. Ken and Wida, thank you so much for the opportunity. As Andrea mentioned, FANUC is the world's leader in factory automation. It's actually incredible how much news and publication we're getting right now. But really, factory automation has been in place since the 60s, the 1960s, and it's been in factories for a long time. And I think that now, with some of the trade discussions that's really been happening since President Trump's first administration and now through his second administration, there's so much additional opportunity for us. So to kind of set the stage on factory automation, really throughout time, we focused pretty heavily on finding the worst possible areas of factories for people to be, we say dull, dirty, and dangerous, those types of applications. And all the way through Henry Ford inventing the first modern day assembly line, we found ways to automate those dirty, dull, and dangerous tasks away from getting people hurt or doing repetitive things and trying to really upskill the labor force. As we kind of moved into the Great Recession in 2009, which is getting now close to 20 years ago, the shift of the focus kind of changed a little bit, and we really started to recognize a pretty significant labor shortage that we have in manufacturing. And, at the end of 2009, there was only, say, 90,000 open manufacturing jobs around. As you just fast forwarded a few years, that got up to 500,000 open manufacturing jobs. And then COVID really knocked that down a bit, but it jumped up to over 1 million open manufacturing jobs. And even today, where we sit right now, there's over 400,000 manufacturing jobs open in the United States. And Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, talks about it quite a bit, that he has this huge gap of machinists and other things that he can't find. And so we've really shifted a focus to not just tackling the dull, dirty, and dangerous, but also finding ways to make factories more efficient, to make factories more productive. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it soon, but the use of AI and some of the software-enabled skills have really enabled robotics in general to be much more capable inside the factories themselves. If you turn on YouTube or probably in a lot of your LinkedIn feeds, you're going to see a lot of humanoid robots dancing around and doing flips and cartwheels and things like that. But really, to set the stage, the bulk, not just the bulk, almost exclusively the robots that are used in factories today are traditional, robotic arms and devices and things like that are moving goods around or handling goods. But they are in every single industry that you can possibly imagine, from farming to pharmaceuticals to consumer products to aerospace to now logistics, and certainly automotive as being the primary driver. But even today, automotive only represents about half or even less than half of the industrial robots that get sold into manufacturing today. So maybe a bit of a monologue to start things off, but that's kind of where we sit today.
No, that's really perfect. And when I first started looking into this and reading about it and reading about your company and what you do, I was really fascinated to understand sort of the global context here as well. So give us a sense of, in comparison, what is the sort of robot density in factories across the United States versus our competitors globally? How does that look?
Yeah, so the what's called the IFR, the International Federation of Robotics, is kind of our managing organization that tracks all the data. And they look at two pieces of data of how many robots get shipped in a period of time, and then how many manufacturing employees, based on different labor reports, are used. And so I actually printed them out, so I had them right in front of me. But so in total, in all of manufacturing, the United States has, and this is the year ending 2024, so they're always like a year behind. We have 307 robots installed for every 10,000 manufacturing employees in the job workplace. So 300 robots, 10,000 people. So the penetration of robotics into manufacturing, if you look at it that way, is pretty light compared to how many people are still needed there. The number one company is Korea, where they have 1,220 robots installed for every 10,000 manufacturing people. And even China, so a lot of people will think that, how big and how fast China has grown, and they're the number one consumer of robots by far, by 10, 20, 30 fold. They still only have 165 robots for every 10,000 manufacturing employees. It does change based on the industry. So just for the United States in automotive, if you just look at the automotive industry, there's 1,545 robots, so just about 1,600 robots for every 10,000 people. So the density is a lot greater in automotive, which means that in the rest of manufacturing, there's only 200 robots for every 10,000 people. So maybe not as automated as some people think, and the use of, certainly we know that the use of people in manufacturing is ever important. And step by step, and I think we'll talk about a little bit later, that the use of AI and some of the new technologies of robots are bringing really where the robots are working literally hand in hand with the manufacturing workers. And so we're bringing that automation really tightly integrated with the people as well in the future.
Great. Thank you for setting the stage there, Mike. I want to turn to George from Rockwell Automation. George, I had the pleasure of going to the Rockwell Automation Fair last November. It was completely overwhelming. And what Mike was describing, the breadth of how robots are deployed in industry. But they have to be told what to do or made smart, and they have an opportunity to collect a lot of data. And so the automation is really a part of the whole digital transformation, journey that manufacturers are on. There's a whole ecosystem that needs to be in place for the robotics to deliver on their potential. So, how does the physical then come together with, new software capabilities, AI, and connected devices, so that that deployment of robotics can deliver data-driven value in manufacturing?
Yeah. So Mike laid out a nice history kind of automation because Rockwell has been around. We started off as the Allen Bradley company more than 120 years ago. So mechanical actuation, mechanical and physical actuation to make machines to build assembly lines, that's been around for a long time. But what is happening now, so maybe I'll just kind of maybe even explain my title, Secure Digital Operations. That's kind of what we're interested in now, because we're going to move from physical and mechanical into the use of sensing to use feedback from programmable, like Rockwell makes these things called programmable logic controllers. We're going to be able to make manufacturing more efficient, safer, more environmentally friendly by taking real-time data that comes through sensing devices, sometimes cameras. You'll hear things about machine vision. We're going to use, cameras to become part of the control mechanism. So that means that we need to have security. So if we're going to use this data, our systems have to be cyber secure. And it also means that we're going to be using intelligent devices. We're going to be either programming, or now with the use of AI, we're going to have machines that are learning on the job, so to speak, to find safer, more sustainable, more efficient ways of doing things. So, that's basically my job is security. It's the use of AI and it's the use of software. So that's what you'll hear people talk about: IT, information technology, OT, operations technology, convergence. That's kind of these two things that come together, because increasingly the factory of the future is software defined.
Well, you're collecting, so the machines are learning, but they're also collecting a lot of data that you can then use to optimize your operations or minimize waste or make other kind of decisions around your operations. Can you describe a few examples of that to help people understand how that's working?
Sure. I mean, there are so many different examples. It's almost hard to start. One, I'd like to point out, Mike talked about, the scarcity of workers. I mean, people have not been going into manufacturing. So part of it is, we're using these learning systems to not just replace, but train workers so that they can make better decisions on the job. So some of the things that we're doing are, we're doing what we call emulation and simulation, so that as we're having kind of a rebirth of manufacturing in the United States. And so what we can do is we can simulate an assembly line or a manufacturing line. We can train the workers on what is going to happen. We can even simulate a negative scenario, and they can react to it. And it's almost like a video game. So some of the younger people really enjoy that. So that's one thing. But by using AI, by being able to run lots of simulations without actually physically running it on a plant, because if you're a plant manager, you don't want to go into a plant manager and say, I'm going to run an experiment on your plant. But by having these simulations, we can run these things offline. Then we can make changes. We can see it, observe it in practice, and then we can drive efficiency. Lots of, you mentioned, reduce waste. We've done some things in tire manufacturing that have reduced the amount of scrap in tire manufacturing by significant amounts. And then in medical device manufacturing, we've got Chris from J&J on. We want to make things right the first time, and we have to do it in a highly regulated manufacturing protocol.
Great. Well, that's a great segue to Chris. So Chris, for J&J, I mean, I think everybody's really familiar with J&J as a leading diversified pharmaceutical and a med tech company. But you're an active deployer of AI across, your entire operations from R&D to customer experience. So give us a sense of what that looks like for you.
Sure, and thanks for the invite, and great to be a participant. Yeah, so let's just start off. I think with J&J, we believe AI holds tremendous potential to advance human health, especially when it's combined with our scientific expertise and deep understanding of healthcare. We see AI as not just a tool; it's a force multiplier that helps us solve complex problems, and problems we just couldn't solve in the past. So we've seen a lot of value already over the last, I'd say, 5 years of investment significantly in this space. So for product development and design, we're using AI and data to basically to accelerate drug discovery and development in the pharmaceutical space, for example. We use AI to identify disease drivers, targets, for disease cells, and then select, optimize, and testing compounds at a high velocity and a higher probability of success. So, just to give some color to that, an example, we leverage vast amounts of data sets, internal public data, global data sets, as well as our own internal research to go through thousands of examples of molecules and compounds, maybe millions, to understand which ones would be most likely to have an effect, or which subset would have most likely have an effect on a particular disease cell target, usually an expressed protein on that disease cell. That's a massive amount of work that would normally be done through traditional search techniques, algorithms, but now much quicker and much more accurate. And then we'll use AI models to take that information and then, as was said earlier by George, actually simulate and predict the outcome of these molecules and particular recipes, of compounds, if you like, to modify the design so that we can have a stronger binding affinity. The product will be more stable, more soluble, minimizing toxicity, and minimizing off-target effects. So it's often used to design well in advance of us actually building the compound in any scale. And then just for a little more flavor, in terms of testing, think of, again, thousands of different variations of particular compounds, and we want to understand if it actually will have an impact on an actual disease cell. So going back to Michael's comment on, this is not a task you want, humans to do, where you actually are exposing a disease cell with a particular compound. And so we're using advanced robotics to do that, but then we're capturing image before and after the cell is exposed to that particular compound, and photographing those two images, or taking those images, and then using machine learning and vision AI to actually quantify the reaction of that cell to that compound that's been exposed to. And that's then mathematically calculated to give you a sense of how big that reaction was. I kind of liken it to taking a photo of someone's face before and after being scared by somebody. So you kind of see that differentiation. So that's a couple examples in both in the design phase and in the testing phase, and then in actual development and clinical trial itself, we're leveraging machine learning to actually design the trial. Again, we need real-world data, global data sets, health data, historical trial performance in order to predict a location for an optimal trial. That could be anywhere in the world, and to identify patient populations where the demographic and clinical sort of characteristics really improve the enrollment efficiency, the representation of our patients, and overall study feasibility. Again, massive amounts of data. Disease has no boundaries, and so we need data sets where our patients are potentially going to be. So there's a couple examples of the R&D side. What I do want to point out that this is years of experience with traditional AI or machine learning that we have within our R&D units, and now we're responsibly exploring new opportunities to enhance that with things like generative AI and obviously towards agentic AI. So we've got a lot of experience, but at every single situation, I'm very I want to be very clear on this. We've ensured that people are at the center of this conversation, because in the end, we've got to have our scientific domain knowledge at the center with our human expertise, and obviously this is for patients, and so it has to be accurate and well tested.
Yeah, I mean, that's all incredibly fascinating and encouraging, given where you sit in terms of innovation for public health. But you haven't even touched on sort of how you deploy automation in the manufacturing process, maybe handling inventory and logistics and all that, which I presume you do.
Yeah, I think in manufacturing, I mean, I got a number of examples, I think, as George said, but in manufacturing, no question around improving efficiency, quality, and reliability through predictive maintenance and real-time quality monitoring. A new area for us is actually automating documentation, which is obviously done a lot across many processes, particularly in quality and in R&D. And then we're using advanced models to optimize the actual production processes themselves. Again, at any facility around the world. I mean, this is not just one particular location. In supply chain, I think everybody's probably leveraged or used machine learning for advanced forecasting using some sort of ensemble of models. But what we're now doing is overlaying Gen AI on top of that, so that the users can actually talk and ask questions about the recommendations from those models. So talk to your data is a kind of new thing that we're doing a little more. And then across commercial, which I think is really exciting, there's no question over the last 3 years, we've really created a much more personalized experience for our patients and for our healthcare professionals, rather than coming with a single drumbeat message over and over again, which, many of us have experienced. It's personalized. It's things that they're interested in. It's conversations we've had in the past, no longer having to recall or recite something. I don't remember what happened 2 weeks ago, but we now have that very personalized experience. So anybody who's engaging with a healthcare professional or a patient has got that 360 sort of understanding, and it's of something of interest to them based on their own interaction with our systems globally. And then I think one thing that's really interesting as well from a financial perspective, given that I've got some corporate accountabilities, we're seeing a lot of opportunity with AI applied to our accounts receivable and accounts payable processes. Accounts receivable, you're getting cash, you're trying to reconcile multiple levels of inconsistency between the pricing, maybe a discount, what the customer has paid. Again, back to Michael's point, this is types of roles and jobs and that roles and work that people really don't want to do, but it's something that we have to do in order to make sure we have a good overall customer experience. So there's a couple more examples. I could keep going, but that's it.
Well, it was a great microcosm, in terms of explaining just for one company all of the different ways this can get deployed. Joe, I want to bring you into the conversation as well. Semiconductors are a part of the entire manufacturing landscape. They're in everything. So explain a little bit about semi to begin with, and then the role of automation and software in semiconductor manufacturing.
Thank you, Andrea. It's good to be here and appreciate the opportunity. Are you guys okay? Hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Sorry, I got a little bit of an interruption here. Again, so SEMI is the trade association for the end-to-end semiconductor manufacturing process, which is the most complex manufacturing process ever enabled. We are working to give you some feel for the dimensions at which we work, which is critical to the automation. point is, if you take we're working now in the nanometer and angstrom range. We need to be able to control contamination, eliminate contamination of materials and particles, and operate at a precision of a nanometer. And to give you a feel for what a nanometer is, first of all, take a human hair and divide it 100,000 times, and you've got 1 nanometer. So that's the type of precision that we're working at. And to enable that, our entire process, well, not our entire process, but the key process is referred to as wafer fabrication, and we're building wafer fabs here in the United States, which is very exciting for us again. But that wafer fab process, we're operating again at that nanometer type precision, and it is a completely automated process. So there's just we're working, the wafers themselves are about the thickness of a half of a human hair, and then we're building, we're going through manufacturing process with 1,000 to 2,000 unit operations steps that are operating in that nanometer range that I mentioned. So everything's completely automated. And we've been utilizing machine learning in the industry for quite some time. Our wafer fab facilities are extremely expensive. Cost today to build one of the fabs is about $15 to $20 billion. And as a result, it's a very expensive operation, requiring a great deal of precision, and there's a great deal of focus on collecting data from the manufacturing process. Our leading manufacturers have been collecting as much as 5 billion bits of data a day, and have then large teams who are working to develop algorithms and put AI to practice. And that's again where we're at today. And of course, what it represents and the value it brings, it's very interesting to see. Everybody knows NVIDIA, of course, the manufacturer of the GPUs that are behind AI, and that's the most valuable company in the on Earth. And again, they don't make, but they sell semiconductors. And the most valuable company in Asia today is also part of our association. That's Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, and they make the semiconductors for AMD and for NVIDIA and for Apple and a host of people. And then the most valuable company in Europe today is ASML, which is an equipment company that makes the photolithography equipment that's necessary to put those patterns down on the semiconductors and build the semiconductors at the dimensional side where we're at. So again, completely automated, very much enabling the industry around the world to use AI. And with that, of course, so no person ever touches the wafer, completely automated, working at the dimensions that are unimaginable for most. So everything is automated and requires a software system to operate it. So one of the things I thought would be interesting to share with you all is that, the thing that we didn't get to yet is we also need a great deal of security. So cybersecurity in our industry is extremely important. And that's one of the things that SEMI does. So we're a standards development organization, and over the last few years, we've been developing cybersecurity standards that are put in place to ensure that the manufacturing process that we utilize is also secured from cyber attacks, and a critical aspect of what we do. A lot going on here in the U.S. Finally, I'll mention that really U.S. government's been very involved. SEMI was approached a few years ago, and government officials came to us and said, you realize that the chips we need for our defense systems are not manufactured here in the U.S. And we were all very aware, as most of us who work in the industry spend a lot of our time in Asia, where our manufacturing had moved to. But again, under the first Trump administration, the CHIPS Act was first talked about, and had a good deal of support on both sides of the aisle. Came back to the Biden administration before it was actually approved, but that happened in August of 22. And now today we have the 5 leading manufacturers of semiconductors, the most capable companies to manufacture semiconductors, all building and operating facilities here in the U.S. So a lot going on here for us as well.
Joe, great survey on semiconductors. We haven't really dipped yet into sort of the nexus between manufacturing 4.0 and trade policy, and you touched on cyber as one facet of that. But what are some other, I mean, given that we've talked about all the data that gets collected that sort of is global data, moves across borders, that it's AI enabled, what are some of the other policies that SEMI is concerned with that really touch on and affect manufacturing 4.0, and manufacturers' ability to source globally, to manufacture globally, to serve global customers while protecting all these digital processes, protecting their data, protecting the software that runs it, et cetera?
So ours is a global supply chain. First to start out, in the process of managing or manufacturing a semiconductor or a chip, as we most often commonly call devices, that chip in its manufacturing process is not unusual to cross an ocean 6 times. And with that, the data that's required to manufacture the chip, track the chip, that also is transferred. The design, it's not unusual to have the design done in the United States and the chip manufactured in anywhere. It can be manufactured in the U.S., can be manufactured in Asia, it can be manufactured in Europe, and then it'll also end up, it may be designed in the U.S., the wafer manufactured in the U.S., but then the chip, the final packaging and assembly done in Asia. And with that, we've got to be able to transfer data securely around the globe. And the control of that data transfer is something that gets a lot of attention today. And our companies are very much want to make sure that that can be done in an efficient and secure manner in order to make sure the device is pure when it goes into actual use and whatever the electronic device is. So that's critical to us. The supply chain is also critical. We've got to, in many cases, we are now sourcing. Chips have been really in mass manufacture since about the late 70s, early 80s. And back then, the process wasn't as complex. We used like 13 elements of the periodic table to manufacture a chip. We're now up to 61, and the critical minerals issues are really critical to us. So again, the control of that supply chain, ensuring a reliable supply of those materials is again something where we're getting an awful lot involvement with the government. We meet regularly. Well, I'll be in Washington next week. We have over 100 of our member companies coming into Washington. And we'll be on the Hill to talk about principally trade issues. So tax and tariffs are very important to us, but then it goes through to ensuring that there's proper regulation on the materials use and availability of the supply chain.
Great. And Chris, you talked about all the collection of all this proprietary data and processes. What are you thinking about in terms of AI governance, risk management?
Yeah, I mean it's critical, and data is a big part of AI. You can't have successful AI without successful data governance, and then on top of that AI governance. And so for us, for J&J, trust is foundational. We kind of have 3 areas around risk management that we sort of focus on. So trust by design and governance. So we ensure that that trust is foundational to what we do all through the process, and AI is no different. And so what we've established is a strong governance and policy framework. All J&J AI applications are reviewed by a multifunctional sort of AI council before it goes to any sense of scale. And what I mean by multifunctional is not just within the business line or the function. It's across all the lines to ensure we're considering all the regulation, all different privacy regulation, especially, but also other concerns before it's actually approved. And then once it is approved and start to scale, we've built AI in our AI delivery or SDLC delivery lifecycle. These elements of security, fairness, ethics, and transparency, so that it's embedded throughout the whole process of development to ensure that we're doing responsible and appropriate use of AI. The second pillar is around people-centered AI. People remain at the center of all AI-enabled processes. For J&J, AI is designed to augment, not to replace human judgment. particularly in high stakes environments such as healthcare, R&D, and manufacturing. And so, we find that results not only in a high quality outcome, but it develops our talent and also reduces overall risk, because you've got well-informed individual that's managing or orchestrating these AI capabilities. And then the third pillar around risk management is workforce readiness as a risk mitigation. So, effective AI risk mitigation depends on a digitally fluent workforce. We're investing in upskilling all of our global employees so that they can safely and effectively pair their deep expertise with advanced AI technology, moving beyond AI adoption, which is kind of using AI, toward AI fluency, which is using AI well. So we enable innovation while ensuring responsible and compliant and confident use across the enterprise. So managing risk is a big part of that. And then from a policy perspective, I think through this discussion, it's clear that AI is if it's not already there, it will become a modern integral component of manufacturing, because it allows organizations of all sizes to amplify their capabilities, improve quality, as we've sort of discussed. And given the importance of that, I think, we believe policymakers should pursue clear and coherent and carefully designed frameworks so that AI can be, responsibly used, but while continuing us to allow for product innovation. J&J, we're actively engaged with policymakers, and we participate in industry forums like this to help build a shared understanding of how AI is actually used in the manufacturing environment, and then what is needed to enable safe and effective deployment at scale. And that, we believe that policy development benefits from drawing on manufacturers' real world experience. And so that we can give you good examples, we can walk through, with meaningful outcomes as to what it really means. And so, for us, from a policy perspective, an environment that is more global, it definitely, builds in trust and ethics and security, as we all discussed, but with innovation at mind as well. This will help strengthen the US competitive leadership in AI, while ensuring these technologies ultimately improve outcomes for patients and society. We think we can do both.
Yeah. So, I mean, J&J is really in a, if you think about where everybody is in their digital transformation journeys, you're pretty far along in your journey. But, George, you said something to me previously about how Rockwell, delivers products and services to manufacturers of all sizes who are in different stages of that digital transformation. So they may be, it's not just building new facilities that are tricked out with the latest thing, but really upgrading, brownfield facilities as well. So how important is the role of standards to ensure interoperability of systems, interoperability of data collection, storage, and usage? Because it's the global manufacturing.
Well, Chris could probably tell you this because he's probably struggling with this. What I say is, you need open standards because you need solutions that work across multiple platforms. Because what I say is everybody has everything. If I go to a company, they've grown by acquisition, or they've got, facilities all across the world. There's different types of things. So if we're going to leverage the power of Industry 4.0 or 5.0, all of these things have to talk to each other. So the open integrated systems is foundational, and it's not something that many people really think about, or it might not be too sexy to people, but the notion of having industry reference data architectures is incredibly important, because we've got to be able to access the data that these machines are producing. The other thing I'd point out is that Joe mentioned something. If you think about, as he goes in his periodic table from 15 elements to 61, mining is really important. That's a really important industry. And mining tends to operate in giant macro cycles. So what does that mean? It means that, they haven't invested a lot. And so when you start talking about smart manufacturing, in addition to open standards, another challenge that me and my team address very frequently is how do we modernize? We have to modernize a plant before we can really digitize it. So, because you might be dealing with things literally from the 1950s. You're not going to get smart data out of that. So how do you build a program where you can do that? Because, Joe and his semi clients, they want to build these fabs.
Yeah.
So
And
those are the things we're looking at.
Hey, George, maybe Andrea, sorry if I
Yeah, go
don't
ahead.
mind, I'll jump in because George brings up a really good point. I can't see the job titles of the audience of the people listening in, but in terms of as we move to AI and open standards in manufacturing, it's a really good point to bring up that not only do we need to consider these things, that very infrequently do we have a pure greenfield opportunity where we're like building a plant from the ground. Maybe Joe's guys, a couple of these chip factories that are going to pop up are going to be pure greenfields, but almost all of the time we're adding things to something that exists right now. And it's a really good point so that not only do we have to consider upgrading other things within the factory to be able to really take advantage of this, but step by step, we also have to continue to consider how to design our products for manufacturing that forever, whether it's, some of the consumer products that J&J makes, or cars, as Ford recently mentioned, where they're kind of trying to change the factory line concept or how Tesla does it. You really have to fundamentally think about changing the way you manufacture things to take advantage of a lot of these things. So if there's people online listening to that, it's very difficult to do it with all the existing equipment you have in your plant. You really do have to reconsider that, and some of the stuff's really old that's out there. So it's a really good point that George brought up. I just wanted to highlight that from my side as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to underscore. I think people sort of don't appreciate it enough. We're living in a policy space where we're hearing a lot of the sort of big, sexy new investments, but I mean, most of manufacturing is about this process that you've just described, right? About modernization of existing facilities, which is equally important. And we need trade to do it as well. There's a question in the chat about, bringing in equipment and inputs, and that's not just for greenfield. It's for modernizing. It's for modernizing existing factories and upgrading. Joe, you've mentioned sort of industry standards, that policies, the deployment of AI and everything else is moving so fast that governments should be paying attention to industry developed standards as part of this story about interoperability and appropriate standards.
It's really critical. We have partnered with NIST. We've also partnered with the Japanese government though as well, and we get the work effectively done in both cases. And again, I just can't emphasize enough that in our world it's a global economy, and we need to be able to conduct business in efficient methods with things moving around the world as much as they do. We're also looking at that security of the supply chain, and is another critical area that was really important to us. There's more of the, definitely a whole lot more of make things where you sell them as well as becoming prevalent and part of that security standard. But for us, it's never going to be a complete supply chain capability. So we do need to be able to do things efficiently, safely, and securely around the globe. And the standards really help us to do that. But it goes beyond that. We do need support from the government to recognize that these policies to be effective, we need to be able to conduct our business on a global basis.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat about how AIs and these processes you're describing are evolving more quickly than laws can be passed. And so how do policymakers ensure that, these frameworks keep pace with these advances? What more can we be doing to have conversations like this where we understand sort of where you are as manufacturers?
But one of the things we've done is within SEMI, within our own organization, is we recognized that about 4 years ago, and for the last 4 years, we've been holding an international policy summit, and we've worked real hard to bring 8 different governments to that meeting and to engage and from there work on a daily basis with those governments to ensure they understand what the needs of our industry are to move forward. And it's been really effective in doing that. So really, really helpful to we haven't sat back and with the old adage of in Washington, right? If you're not involved,
I
you're
think
on the
it's if
menu.
you're not at the table, you might be for lunch or
If you're
something
not at
like
the table, you're on the
that.
menu. Yeah, so that age old. So we've been working that if you're not at the table, you're likely you could be end up on the menu. So it's been something that we found is just a necessity. So we bring our leaders, our industry leaders, to the government on a regular basis to ensure that happens.
Well, broadening that out, the administration is very interested in robotics. I think they're about to maybe even a week or two have another robotics roundtable in Washington, and wanting to understand really what it's going to take to expand the use of automation across all facets of manufacturing in the U.S. I mean, Mike, what is your message then to the administration about what's needed in terms of the policy ecosystem to support that uptake?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I agree with a lot of the comments that Joe was making is that, the world does operate on a global supply chain. However, I think that the administration's drive towards making sure that we can make in America the things that we need for America is critically important. And so I think a lot of the overriding policy that is try to make more where we need it to use it is important. There's a question in the chat about 232 tariffs on
Yeah.
robots. So for those of you that are online that don't know, the administration opened up a 232 tariff investigation on robotics and machine tools, not just robotics, but also machine tools, manufacturing machine tools last year. And that investigation, the comments of that have already been submitted, including by us, Andrea, with NAM, as well as our NAM, and as well as FANUC and many others. But I think from my perspective, is that we do need a national robotics strategy in the United States. That's necessary. We can look at China as somebody that has done that. They started a policy in 2015, China 2025, where the Chinese government supported financially and the government supported action to bring more robotics locally into the Chinese market. And within the last 10 years, now it took 10 years, and in the last 10 years, now 50% of the robots that are used in China are produced in China. So it didn't happen. A couple of the things I would highlight for those listening is, number one, it didn't happen overnight. Number two, it was a supportive program. It was a strategic supportive program by the government that was funded in a lot of ways by the government to bring more of that technology into the country. And we're for that. That I think that kind of strategy would be very beneficial to our country to do that, because right now, most of the industrial robots that are used in manufacturing are brought in. Now, fortunately, as maybe Joe mentioned it before, they are brought in by very, very solid trade partners of the United States, Japan and Europe being the two largest trade partners that are bringing industrial automation into the United States, which is good and solid. But I think a government-sponsored national robotics strategy is critically important for the future. I think that in the short term, additional tariffs on imported robots would slow down manufacturing. It certainly would as it drives the cost up in the short term. So I think, but long term, I do believe that manufacturing more in the United States is critically important. It's important not just from our military perspectives, but as certainly as Chris mentioned, bringing medicine and pharmaceuticals, let alone all the other things that J&J does. It's critically important that we define a strategy.
Great. Anybody else want to chime in on that question, or even more broadly? You're all leaders. When it comes to advancing these manufacturing 4.0 trends, you're all playing a really critical role in developing the products and developing the software behind the products, the machinery, and then deploying it in really innovative ways. But I mean, what do we need to do as a country to continue to be a global leader across these trends?
Maybe really quick, Andrea. Sorry, George, I'll let you talk. But you brought up something I forgot to mention is that from a software perspective, you mentioned software, and especially around AI. The new buzzword around us is called physical AI. So that's taking all the cool AI stuff that is developed on NVIDIA chips and through all the stuff that Joe's organization does. And it creates this brain that sits outside the robot. And you can imagine you can hook up an unlimited number of cameras and an unlimited number of sensors into this AI brain and let it figure things out. And then that AI brain tells a robot what to do and how to do it. And I will that from a strategy perspective, that talent and that knowledge does sit within the United States very securely. And so we need to protect that. We need to continue to build upon that and protect that. Where most of my discussion sat around the hardware side of things, but from a software, I mean, we really do sit in the epicenter of that, which is great, and it's ever growing. It really hasn't even, aside from all the great things Chris is doing on that side, as it comes to actually controlling a robot in a plant, is not yet even tapped, close to being tapped for what its potential could be in the future. Sorry, George, to interrupt you.
Actually, I was going to make a comment, Mike and Joe, but comment I wanted to make was our biggest challenge in the U.S. on a global basis is around workforce, is having the talent necessary. When I speak to our member companies, we've got a very nice growth profile in front of us. Our industry, it's very interesting right now. We were a growth industry for 50 years, and about 2020 we broke $400 billion in sales. And this year we'll break $1 trillion. So we've had our industry grow 2.5 times in 6-7 year period. So tremendous growth. Number one risk to us, though, in achieving our growth, maximizing our growth, is having the talent necessary. And we really have it's just basics. Like we've got to get out there and make young students aware of what the opportunities are and engage them and attract them to our industry, get them trained. We have wonderful educational systems in the United States today, but we're not attracting enough engineers into those roles. Things have kind of flipped around on us. So it's interesting from an AI perspective. The software is equally important, but it used to be we'd have 3 electrical engineers for every computer scientist, and now that's reversed and flat out. We just don't have enough engineers. We need materials engineers and electrical engineers to make semiconductors, and we don't have enough. We've got great programs here. Those programs in the U.S., the advanced degrees, 70-80% are foreign nationals in those programs, and many of those folks would like to stay here and be part of our economy and part of our growth story in semiconductor. But then we have issues with immigration. So there's some real interesting complexities where policy comes into effect in supporting the educational programs and awareness that's necessary to bring people into STEM education. And then also being able to, we can attract some global talent, but we need to be able to keep those folks here and be part of our economy.
Yeah, Joe, I think that not only do you have to worry about the engineers, but I think a really untapped spot is at the community college level as well. And part of this robotic strategy has to be around education by far. We've taken a grassroots approach to this, and even with a grassroots approach and working with a couple strategic partners, we have over 5,000 robots and machine tools installed in schools just in the United States, where they're primarily in the community college level, and then high school being the next level. with a lot of the research organizations doing this, but we need manufacturing workers as much as we need engineers. And like I said, we've taken a grassroots approach. We're in 1,700 schools across North America, but boy, it could be so much bigger. And I think we're ready. I think now with the administration and the where people understanding what other college degrees are getting you in the workforce, people are recognizing that maybe going to community college and getting a professional certification to go into manufacturing is a good way to go too. Sorry, Chris.
We could do an entire panel just on workforce development, and we probably should. Great point. Sorry, Chris, you want to jump in?
No, I was just going to reemphasize. I think if we and when I mean the US can lead in global standards and drive that across you know, our other countries, I think that'll be a huge benefit. The fragmentation will destroy our ability to leverage AI, you know, in a way that's any sense of scale. And then with talent, the conversation I'd like to bring up is that what I'm seeing, not just within the manufacturing space, but also in the office space, if you like, in the white collar work, is that you know the AI has jumped into the education landscape, and so what we're finding is we need to think about how do we keep this critical thinking as a key prerequisite, because otherwise, you know, people just will begin to rely too much on the recommendations from these algorithms, and we still need that base core knowledge set, those hands-on skills, that hands-on thinking, to be very relevant into the world of AI.
Joe, you're so polite there with your hand up, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Just I want to build on the comment on the community colleges and getting folks trained with those technical certifications is really important. And I want to make a comment. One of the areas that we're focused on in attracting people to our industry right now are folks who come out of our military. They served our country in a very important way. And in many cases, they've certainly never manufactured a semiconductor, but their skills in operating sophisticated weapon systems, sophisticated aircraft, and nuclear subs is very relevant to our field. And we're actually going out there to the bases now and looking to try and attract them to our industry. So again, I don't need more competition, but
No.
I really, but this is one area where I think it's really worthwhile. Folks,
Yeah, Rockwell's
deserve
funding
good
a program
opportunities
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rockwell's doing it. We have the Manufacturing Institute, partner sister organization of NAM, is doing that as well. And you're all right to bring that up in terms of workforce. I know we're coming to the end of the panel. I want to give Ken an opportunity to kind of come on and close out the day. But let me just say, I mean, thank you to Ken, because this is a little bit of an unorthodox panel in the sense that I sort of assiduously avoided deep dive on the trade policy side, mainly because we wanted to get across to the trade policy community that manufacturers are really uniquely positioned as both developers of the technology and deployers of these technologies, and that this is a real force multiplier, but we need the right policy ecosystem. But people kind of need to understand, you know, what the needs are in manufacturing, what the manufacturing equities are in this space. So very much appreciate, Ken, the opportunity to have us do this panel and start the conversation and hopefully continue it on future panels. And thank you to all of you, Chris and Mike and George and Joe, for all of the detail that you provided to bring this to life for us. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Andrea.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. You know,
Okay.
I was going to jump in and say, I actually know a former nuclear submarine commander who's now working at an energy firm. I had lunch with him just a couple of weeks ago. So you're on to there's not that many of them, well, there's not too many of them, but there's this, I know one in particular. We've truly covered an amazing range of issues today, guys. And this closing session is so important for our trade professionals and to make up our audience today and the WIDA membership. We sometimes get so wrapped up in a policy that we don't get under the hood and understand how things we're talking about with government officials translate to the shop floor. And I know I learned a lot today, and I'm truly grateful to you guys. Thanks to everyone who stuck with us. Tomorrow, we're going to kick things off with an in-person networking breakfast at 8:30 a.m. at the Ronald Reagan Building. And we'll go live on Zoom with our first session, both in person and online, at 9 a.m. We announced, as you can see on the agenda that we popped up there, that we're going to be addressing the IEPA fallout in our final panel that we've added to the agenda. Anyone who registered for the conference will receive a link to watch via Zoom, but we hope those of you in DC will join us in person. For those of you watching online Tuesday, you should have received a reminder from Zoom this morning with your link to watch online tomorrow, and you'll get another reminder about an hour before we kick things off tomorrow. Note that it's a different link than you had today. We look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Thank you all. Thank you to our panel, Chris, Michael, Joe, George, Andrea. Thank you for your partnership and your friendship in helping put this panel together, and your support for WIDA's work, and your member of WIDA's board of directors, and we're truly grateful to you as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great